But today we will be talking about the venomous species, specifically of snakes and arachnids in the Los Angeles and Orange County region. Today I hope to clear up some of the mythos and other fake lore about these animals. They're unfortunately the ones that get pegged as the bad guys that give other not deadly, not dangerous snakes and arachnids the bad reputation. So I will be answering any questions you guys may have, but please withhold all questions until after the presentation. So first I want to begin with what is venom. There are several species that have venom. There are 2 lizards, debatably 3, the Gila, the beaded lizard, and now known the savanna monitor as well. There are about 40 snakes in California that are venomous, but there's only 11 in California specifically. Today we're going to focus specifically on 4. Those 4 are the ones that can be found not just in Southern California and the southwestern areas, but actually right here at Bolsa Chica. Right now it is kind of rattlesnake season here at Bolsa Chica. Their mating season starts April through May. Their eggs will hatch out in August, but because of the warmer weather, we actually have had some of them hatching out significantly earlier this year due to early mating seasons because of the lack of rain, which is really interesting. So right now we're actually seeing a lot of baby helleris, a lot of baby atrox. But what is venom? A lot of people will interchangeably use the terms poison and venom. This is very incorrect. There's a serious difference between the two, and it actually can help save or take away a life in a hospital situation if it comes to that. Venom is a highly specialized form of saliva. It's something the animal produces itself, and it has to be injected, which means it's either being used via stinger. Venom has to be injected directly, either a stinger, a hollowed out fang through its own cavity, or some other type of pinching or stabbing device, which would be found more commonly in an insect. Today we're really going to focus on stingers with the use of a telson or hollowed out fangs. Poison is actually a mucus that is on an animal, usually found on amphibians only, not reptiles or arachnids. And it's oftentimes a bacteria that's working along with that animal in a symbiotic relationship to help consume or to consume its prey, or not to just break it down, but to actually keep the animal safe itself. And that's usually found in toads. When you're out on the trails at Bolsa Chica, I just want to go over some really basic, some of you guys might know this, but the difference between a venomous snake and a non-venomous snake. For those of us that are familiar with snakes, it's pretty obvious. When you guys get a chance, you can come up close and look at our ruber today. Is one of the best examples. The first example on it that you can see is it has a triangle head. This pit or its venom glands will actually create a puffed out effect on its head, giving it that triangle appearance. You'll notice it has inset eyes with an elliptical pupil. They'll have a much more chubby body as opposed to an elongated stick-like body. One of the other things you'll notice, if it's sunbathing or flipped over, you'll notice that the venomous snakes oftentimes will actually have elongated belly scales, whereas the non-venomous snakes will have scales that are moving all the way around its body, like actual little scales. There are several exceptions to this. So generally you want to focus on what the head actually looks like. There are some snakes that are a complete exception, but that's really more in the southeastern part of our country. So the first snake we're going to be talking about today is the western diamondback rattlesnake, more commonly referred to amongst herpetologists as the atrox. The atrox is the snake that really has delivered the reputation of being a bad guy for other rattlesnakes. They are the most aggressive. They're actually responsible for the most rattlesnake-associated deaths. We have close to 6 to 7 deaths per year in the United States associated with the atrox, and they actually have closer to 40 deaths per year in Mexico. They account for 10 to 20% of all fatalities in the Mexican desert and in this extreme southwestern, so United States, so Texas, mainly in the Mexican border. The reason for this is not only do they have one of the more potent venoms, but they're actually just generally the most aggressive snake. They tend to not back off. These are the ones that will most often use their rattle. It's actually a little bit of a myth that rattlesnakes will use their rattle to ward you off. Oftentimes they don't like to give their presence away at all, so they'll actually restrict themselves from using their rattle. So you usually won't hear it. Generally, when you hear a rattle, especially here at Bolsa Chica out on the trails, you're actually hearing another snake called the San Diego gopher snake. That snake is the one that will use its elongated tail to rattle in bushes and make a fake or false rattlesnake sound. So usually when people freak out and they think they hear this really classic, loud rattlesnake, it's not a rattlesnake at all. These guys are the second largest, arguably the third largest rattlesnake amongst the others, but they're still long. They can still reach 4 to 5 feet. They'll mate April through May, lay their eggs in August. And these guys are also one of the widest spreads, so you can really find them all across the Southwest. You can actually find them further down in Mexico, down to about central Mexico. And I realize this map doesn't quite show them coming all the way out into Orange County, but they do. We do find them here at Bolsa Chica.
You find them on the Quail Trail too, in Shady Canyon Drive.
Is that out by Deer Canyon, what they call right off the 133?
Yeah. The 133 where you're on your way to the Irvine Spectrum.
Yeah, where they've been doing new construction out there, and they actually had a halt. It's my understanding they had a halt construction for a while because they kind of came across a very, very large den of them. And they can bite you straight through a boot. They have one of the larger fang sizes. Most have a fang size of 1 inch or less. Theirs is actually 2.5 inches. So you don't want to give it. They have a very unpleasant venom. It's proteolytic, so what it's basically doing is it's attacking your blood cells directly. It'll cause the blood cells to rupture upon impact of the venom, and you'll actually start to hemorrhage at the same time. So what happens is you get these exploding cells that then begin to hemorrhage as they're moving through your circulatory system, through the heart. And if it's untreated for a long amount of time, roughly 3 to 4 days, you can actually suffer from your heart beginning to explode by the cells bursting out through your first artery, your main artery of your heart. So it is actually considered one of the most painful venoms to experience. I don't recommend it. One of the biggest issues with it is actually goes to the skeletal muscle tissue as well. So it really tries to attack the body all at once. Usually what happens is, if you see here, what's happened is they've cut his entire arm open. So if you go to the hospital for this, you receive an antivenom in addition to immediate surgery where they actually have to cut out any tissue it's so far affected to keep it from spreading. The antivenom works not as fast as they would like it to, and this is actually one of the ones they're still trying to improve on. The red diamondback rattlesnake, or more commonly referred to as the ruber, is the one we have with us today. These are the largest species of rattlesnake, period. And they're actually one of the ones right here at Bolsa Chica as well. And the nice thing about these is, even though they can reach up to 155 inches, that's massive, that's about 12 feet, you rarely see them that large. The largest I've ever actually seen is about 7.5 feet. The one we have with us today is 5.5. Despite their massive size, they actually have the least potent venom. There have been several reports of people being bit by the ruber, never receiving an antivenom, and actually being fine. That's still not recommended. If you are allergic, you can still suffer from permanent tissue damage. You still would want an antivenom. But the nice thing is that, unlike most other rattlesnakes, they do not target the circulatory system or the nervous system with their venom. They're targeting muscle tissue directly. So if you get bit, it actually, for the most part, will be concentrated in the affected area. You don't have to worry about venom spreading throughout your body. So it's still very painful, with about a 3/4 to 1 inch fang bite, so it's actually more painful just from the bite itself than the actual venom spreading. So if you have to get bit, this is the one I would recommend. One of the things that's nice about them as well is that they're so obvious. They have that really beautiful rust color. They're actually born gray. And as they get older and more mature, they'll turn into a rusty red color. Some of the males will turn out bright orange, and they have that classic zebra tail. The interesting thing about these guys is they're one of the few snakes that showcase sexual dimorphism. The male looks different from the female. Males will actually be significantly larger from the females. In the reptile world, this is very rare. It's usually the opposite. The males will be larger by almost 2 feet, and their zebra tail will actually be significantly larger as well. The females will only have a few inches, 2 to 3 inches of the tail, and the males will actually have up to 12 inches of tail, so they can have a foot of that zebra stripe if they're a very large male. So this, the person that the picture is labeled after 48 hours, that actually is an example of someone that never received an antivenom. What happens is the person will still suffer from extreme swelling. So that is a problem where you don't want to have any type of tight clothing. It is recommended that wherever you're bit, you remove any articles of clothing, jewelry, things like that to prevent swelling and rupturing of the skin. But generally, this is considered best case scenario if you were to be bit by a venomous animal. They can also cause something called gas gangrene with this particular species, the atrox as well. Gas gangrene is actually from partially ruptured blood cells that then rot within the circulatory system because they can't be moved out, and they will start their own form of gangrene and can actually cause internal rotting starting from your vein vessels inside out. So that is considered very painful and something that could potentially kill you if untreated, but it's only very rare cases. I've heard less than 2% of the cases being bit by rubers will actually cause that. The next one that's also very common here at Bolsa Chica is our southern Pacific rattlesnake, better known as the helleri. The helleri is not quite as aggressive as the atrox, but it's still much more aggressive than the rubers. These guys are spread all throughout Western America. People see them starting to come out into new places as well. This is a group of snakes, a group of the pit vipers that actually burrow and will go into a form of hibernation during the winter months. Most rattlesnakes, because they live on the west coast, they don't need to do that. They can actually stay out year-round. They just become a little bit slower form of light brumation, but these guys will actually have a full hibernation state. And one thing people are noticing is that they're now spreading out even further. This map, I can almost promise you, was done maybe 20 years ago in terms of what information or what mapping is represented on it. They now know that they're actually spreading out much further south into Mexico, and they think that is because all the construction and building development that's going on is actually driving them out of their burrows and going further down south. A lot of people are starting to notice them around new construction sites. I know that the helleri is also one of the ones they found over off the 133, out by Deer Canyon, out by Laguna Niguel, that they had not seen them there before. So this is definitely one that you would want to watch out for. The nice thing about them is that they're pretty obvious. No other snake has a pattern quite like them. They have perfect circles or blotches of their coloring. And they keep their neon rattle. When rattlesnakes are born, all species of rattlesnakes, they're born with a neon rattle, which helps them kind of stand out. It's like waving a little yellow flag. Most rattlesnakes, it'll turn brownish or sometimes even a reddish color over time. You can see on our ruber example, her tail almost matches the same color as the rest of her body. The helleri likes to keep that bright yellow tail for as long as possible, and that is mainly because they're a much smaller size rattlesnake, and so they need all the help they can get to warn off predators. That also goes into the behavior and personality that rattlesnakes have that most other snakes do not. The reason they're so aggressive and they're so flashy, except for the rubers, is because they really don't have a defense system. The only thing they're truly capable of is biting and hoping that their venom worked. If they're attacked, they're really not able to do anything about it. They don't have the immune system that other North American snakes like the king snake, the gopher snake, and the rat snake have. If they're bit by their prey, they're easily prone to infection, unlike other species. And so by having that aggressive behavior to scare off other animals, and by having things like that yellow rattle, it really helps them for survival. Now with the helleri is also one of the venoms that you really do not want to have to deal with. The picture right here is actually taken from a newborn about a month ago at Bolsa Chica, found right at the beginning of the trail, right off the bridge. So this is proof. They are here, smack dab right next to the trail. But you'll see that they do have that neon rattle. One of the myths I actually would like to go over is I'm sure some of you have probably heard the myth that babies are born with more venom than adults are. I don't know if anyone's ever heard that myth. It's not true. They're not born with more venom. I'm not exactly sure where that myth came from. What's happening is they are immature with their fangs. All species of rattlesnakes constantly lose and regrow new fangs, just like sharks do. They're a tubular fang. Actually, a better example would be a cat's claws. If you've ever seen a cat scratch, their claws are actually a hollowed out tube that pulls off in sheaths. Rattlesnakes have the same thing, only instead of a sheath, it's the whole tooth, and they regrow it. When babies are born, they're kind of like little crazy bobble-headed creatures. They sort of grow into their fangs. They're not very good at using them. As opposed to coming out all at once or at the same time evenly, they don't. They kind of come out one at a time, sometimes crooked. And so I think where that myth might have originated from is because they're having a hard time properly using their fangs and trying to grow into them, they prematurely will ejaculate their venom and they'll produce too much. So what's happening is instead of reserving part of their venom in their venom sacs for their prey, they tend to freak out and they'll just push out everything they have. And so that might be where part of that myth is, that they have more than an adult. But either way, they still have venom. They're still born with venom right out of the egg. So one thing you want to make sure is not to get bit by this particular species. It is another species that targets the muscle system directly, and it actually works so fast that they're trying to produce a new form of antivenom for these. They currently have one, but it's not working at a rapid enough rate to counteract the venom. A lot of people are actually finding that amputation is faster than antivenom for this particular species. So this is one of the what's happening here is this person has been bit in the hand. Now the way you can tell it was the hand, not because it's cut open, but do you see this black tissue? This actually will kill any outer tissue on contact, so you will immediately get black, hard scabbing that has to be cut off and removed immediately. And then what they do typically is they'll actually cut up so many inches from where they believe the venom has spread, and then they will try to cut out that tissue. So in this particular picture, it looks like this person is going to lose pretty much all of their forearm, which is very unfortunate. But this is one of the ones that it is critically important. You do receive an antivenom and you get to a hospital. The thing with rattlesnakes is most rattlesnakes, you have the minimum of 3 days to get to a hospital. Some you're lucky and you will not necessarily need antivenom. They don't always produce venom on impact, but you definitely want to have an antivenom shot if you do get bit. The southwestern speckled rattlesnake, or the Pyrrhus, is the last one we're going to be focusing on today before we move to arachnids. This snake has never been found at Bolsa Chica, but there is speculation that it might be moving forward. The reason for that is this is a highly adaptable snake when it comes to its environment. For a long time they believed it was only a desert species, even though it can be found across the southwestern United States. It tends to like not an arid climate, which is what they originally thought, but it likes a sandy climate. And they now know that it actually can be found right along the coast in coastal scrub. which is really interesting. You would think that the temperature would bother it, but they're finding it prefers more so the physical terrain than it does the temperature. So they recently found these guys at the most southern part of Orange County that they did not know they were there before. That was about 10 years ago. And so it is possible they're in this area and we're just not seeing them due to human impact. But I kind of speculate that if we keep construction and kind of cringing forward towards taking up more land space, we might find them here. So just to let you guys know, this is one that could be encountered. It could definitely be encountered if hiking in the southern Orange County region. They're heavily speckled, and they actually come in two completely different colors, which is really interesting. This is not two different species or subspecies. It is the exact same group of snakes. They'll come in almost a pure white color like an albino, and they can also come in a very dark, almost basalt rock looking color as well. They're a very small species of rattlesnake, and what's really interesting about them is that even though they tend to be aggressive, there's a lot that's unknown about their actual venom. There have been very few cases of bites or snake attacks with this particular species, and a lot of people are actually reporting, or at least those that have been bit, are reporting that it's a painless bite, and if there is any pain associated with it, it doesn't come until up to an hour later. There have been a few people that have not received an antivenom after being bit from this particular snake and have lived without suffering any muscle tissue loss. The problem is because these guys tend to blend into their natural environment so well, they're much harder to find than a snake that's blatantly obvious, like the Rubers, which is bright red, or the Atrox, which is so aggressive it lets you know where it is even if you don't see it. So this is actually a snake that they're currently on the lookout for to do more research towards its venom. As of right now, it's still being listed as a venomous species, but is not being listed as a highly venomous species like the Atrox or the Hellerite cousin. So it's one to look out for, but I would not think it should be one to be terrified of. For a long time, they actually thought it was a subspecies of Ruber because it has the zebra tail. But it tends to be very short, less than 2 inches, so they are classifying as its own species. The importance of collecting venom is called milking. Milking is a really interesting occupation. It's actually increased in the last 5 years. For a long time, people that got into herpetology or arachnology really felt that even though it was great to be out in the field, the only way to really make money out of it was to become an educator on the topic. Now they're actually finding ways to produce antivenoms that can be used for things other than an antivenom itself, other than to counteract snake venom. They're doing research and they're finding that they can use snake venom to produce medications for Alzheimer's, dementia. It helps with the memory. They're also using it with research to help with cancer, specifically with breast tissue and cervix tissue, which is really interesting. They're hoping they might actually find not necessarily a cure, but a way to subdue breast cancer in a very near future. And then mostly it's used for actual antivenoms. The way they do it, they go out into the field and collect it, or you can actually breed snakes in captivity. The closest one to us, or the closest research facility to us, is actually the Los Angeles Zoo, where they have a very large variety, very large collection of venomous snakes from around the world, where they're doing active venom collection or active milking. And what they do is they inject that venom into a horse or other large mammal, usually a goat or a horse. They inject it into that animal in very small quantities over 2 to 3 month period of time. And the animal will then produce antibodies that will counteract that venom. Over time, they'll continue to inject the animal with not just the same venom, but venom that came from the same specific snake to ensure the serum is pure. And once they know that the animal, usually a horse, has grown immune to that venom, they can then start pulling a blood serum from that animal and use it for the rest of its life to create a antivenom. This is actually harmless to the snake and the horse. believe it or not. The horse does not suffer any medical effects over it because of the very small quantity they inject it with. So it's considered humane, and it's saving people and other domestic animals now. They're now trying to use it to put into cattle, domesticated dogs, and other animals that are out in the Midwest or on areas that would have a large population of naturally venomous snakes, mainly like cattle ranches, dairy farms, things like that. You can also milk a tarantula. This is not one that I brought today, but it's one I have. This is the Theraphosa blondi, also known as the Goliath bird eater from Brazil. They are the largest species of tarantula in the world. So I want to move on to venomous arachnids. People tend to hate arachnids almost more than they do snakes. I think that's really interesting. They're smaller, but I can sort of understand. There are two species of arachnids. Both are scorpions that are actually more dangerous than any of the snakes that I've talked about. I've brought them both here today. So cross your fingers for an earthquake. Unlike snakes, which can travel, move out of their territories for a number of different reasons, mainly due to, as a direct result of humans tampering or somehow affecting their natural territories, arachnids don't like to do that. Arachnids like to generally stay where they are. So anyone out there that's terrified of what I've brought today, don't worry. If you don't go over to where it is not going to come over to where you are. But mainly, the important things I kind of want to go over is a lot of people can't handle the really big, creepy looking things. The nice thing is tarantulas and very large scorpions are not only not dangerous to us, minus the Theraphosa blondi, there's really nothing to be afraid of. There are actually no considered dangerously venomous species of tarantulas in North America. They're all in South America. Again, don't travel there. But there are no species of tarantula that can harm us. Instead, the ones that can harm us are the very small spiders. There's only 2 in North America that can actually harm you. And there are 3 species of scorpions that can harm us, and those are the ones we're going to talk about today. The first one we're going to talk about is the black widow. It's debatably the most dangerous spider in North America. I say debatably because the one that people often talk about, but there's a lot of myth on if it's here or not, is the brown recluse. The black widow really is not as dangerous as people make it out to be. What they've kind of determined is that the people that are most affected by it are the people that are highly allergic. So what's happening is it does produce a very strong venom, but it's a venom that only lasts in the the body size or natural weight of a human or any other mammal of a large size. It can only last up to really 24 hours. So what happens upon biting impact is you can get a very large rash, you can get swelling, you can feel the effect of dizziness, headache, things like that, but you really don't need an anti-venom. The difference is people that are allergic. Now this is very different from the venom in snakes. What's happening is snake venom is produced to kill mammals, essentially. So it works differently. It works on something that has a large circulatory system, that has a pumping heart. Arachnid venom is designed really to work only on other extremely small creatures, again, except the blondi. So you're really only feeling the effect of a venom that can only spread so far. So unless you're allergic, and if the rule of thumb really is if you're allergic to bees, you're going to be allergic to anything that we're going to talk about today. If you're not, then you're going to be okay. So if you get bit by a black widow or any of its friends, don't freak out. You'll actually be okay. You might feel some pain for about 24 hours and then you'll be fine. And we can find these pretty much all over the world, actually. There's now estimated about 60 subspecies of black widow. The one we think of as the black widow is on the western coast. The black widow on the eastern coast is actually not really black. It's more dark brown, like a chocolate brown. And then they have them all over the world, all over the Middle East. They're in Africa, they're in South America, Central America. Europe's is freakishly small. Europe's is actually about a quarter the size of this one. It actually looks very much like a brown widow. The false black widow, or sometimes called the brown widow, actually is an invasive. It came over from Europe, although it is not the same as Europe's black widow. These guys really don't have a venom that can hurt you. The reason I want to talk about them is because people often mistake them as a male black widow, because the male black widow is brown, but it's actually a light tan brown, and it has a significantly smaller abdomen. A lot of times you think it's an entirely different species. You wouldn't know it was a brown widow at all. The brown widows also don't carry the venom. That's one of the few myths that actually is true about the black widow. These guys are almost a perfect look-alike, except they kind of have that jack-o'-lantern Halloween smiley face on their abdomen, and the males and females both have a enlarged abdomen. However, these guys don't have the same painful pack from the venom. And again, you really are only going to find an effect from these if you guys are highly allergic. The brown recluse is the one that I really like to talk about the most. There's a lot of debate on if it's even in the United States at all. I believe that not only it is, but it's right here in California, right where we are. There are too many reports of people finding them. I've personally found them. I actually had one ready for you guys today in a jar. Fortunately, it did not work out. But they are here. One of the theories as to what's going on, people think that now with modern import-export systems, they think that they're just coming in too easily from a number of different ways. Trucking, train, they do know that they can actually handle a higher altitude. They have been found on plane cargo as long as they're smaller planes and not the large freight holding capacity size planes. But they know that pretty much officially, even though they're not listed here, they are here. These guys are significantly more dangerous than the black widow. This one, if you get bit, you pretty much are going to have a reaction. Not as death-threatening as something like a rattlesnake. You're not going to suffer fatality, but it is something that if you're allergic, this can give you a much worse reaction than something like a bee or a black widow. A lot of the effects can include things much worse than just a headache or abdominal cramping like other spiders or bees or other insects, but this can actually cause seizures. So this is something you would definitely want to look out for. I put that they believe there's a subspecies in the California southwestern desert. They're not sure if that is actually a subspecies of the recluse or not. They just know that there is one out there. You'll notice I put two different scientific names under the brown recluse. The one we're talking about right now is the reclusa. The one classified as the deserta, the one in California, they're actually not sure if that's a recluse at all. They just know that it has a very similar venom, similar enough that they think it's a subspecies, even though it is significantly smaller in size. It has a very different appearance to it. It's about half the size. Something there needs to be a lot more research done on. So we'll move on to scorpions, starting with the least threatening. The desert hairy is one of my favorites. This guy is found in the southwest US, mainly Arizona, but crosses over into California quite often. I like to include him in the Los Angeles and Orange County region because this is an animal that's extremely popular in the pet trade right now. So they're an animal that easily could be found, hypothetically, running loose. This is one that's absolutely not to be something of concern, although they do have a venom in their telson. The telson is part of their stinger. So essentially you have a ball with a little stinger that hooks off of it. The telson is that ball. They do have a venom, but it's not something that can harm you. Most people, when they're stung, don't even realize they have been. They're a very docile species of scorpion, and you normally can actually pick them up. They're also one of the larger species of scorpion in North America, so they're not something that would be easily mistaken for something else. This is actually one of the few times where, again, myths can come true. The bigger the pinchers, the less harmful it is to you. As you guys come over and take a look in a little bit, you'll see that it has very long pinchers. It has a very large fat telson. Having a large fat telson means you require more venom to kill your prey, which means your venom is very weak and very diluted. And that is the case with the desert hairy. The bark scorpion, aka the Arizona deathstalker. Today I brought the Egyptian deathstalker. They're so close genetically that it's almost pretty much the same species. They just come from two completely different parts of the world. But they look identical. This guy, you'll notice his telson is actually, it's not bulbular at all. It's very slender and blends into the rest of the tail. These guys are extremely dangerous. This is actually the one that's the only known species of scorpion next to the Egyptian deathstalker that has actually taken human lives. They estimate about 2 people a year die from the deathstalker, and it's because they're so small you can't see them, and they're easily able to be stepped on. They will go into any dark surface, any dark little crevice, any surface they can crawl on or hold on to. They're often found in homes all over Southwest. They're extremely small. They have almost a purplish sheen across their body armor. The one I have is a perfect example of that because it's almost an obese scorpion, so its body armor really stands out against its body. It's kind of hysterical. This one, not only will you require an antivenom, but you'll actually require several. Normally 1 shot doesn't do it. They normally require 4 or 5. Most people that would be more susceptible to that would be small children. The people that have died are usually children under the age of 7 years old. The striped-tailed scorpion. Not as dangerous, not nearly as dangerous as the deathstalker, but definitely something you would want to watch out for more compared to the desert hairy. The striped tail it has a painful punch upon impact, but it's not something that would cause serious medical damage. It wouldn't cause anything that you would have to be afraid of in terms of a fatality, but if you're allergic, again, fatality might be a possibility, and it's something that's extremely painful. It can actually cause serious joint cramping if you get a really good sting, but that would last less than 73 to 48 hours. Some of the fakers I want to talk about, it's really funny. The fakers, it's what I like to call the ones that are absolutely terrifying and people have nightmares of and they use in movies, but they're the ones that are the least dangerous. The first one, which is one of my favorites, is called the vinegaroon. It's terrifying, it's completely alien looking, and it's one of the ones that's right here in California, which is great. It's actually a species of scorpion, despite the fact that it looks like an alien. It is a species of scorpion that has evolved to the point of no longer having a telson at all. So it doesn't have a stinger. Instead, what it does, it has a tubular tail that's used to flick a bead of an acid towards its prey. It's not enough to harm a human being. In fact, you wouldn't even feel it. But if you were something the size of a termite or an ant, you're definitely in trouble. They do have, if you look at them, they do have the armored plating across their abdomen, just like a scorpion. But they actually have, if you check it out compared to scorpion, I'll get back to a picture of a scorpion. If you look at it in comparison to a scorpion, you'll see that all that, instead of having a telson to contain that venom, they actually have a series of 4 different glands on the inside of their abdomen swelling it up to keep a regular supply of that acid that they used to flick. So if you guys want to come up later and check it out, or touch it if you're brave enough, you're welcome to do that. The other one I want to talk to you guys about, because this, funny enough, is one of the ones that so many people become afraid of.
The tarantula?
Yeah. The tarantula I want to talk to you guys about today is an Aphonzopelma schmidti. The Aphonzopelma schmidti is actually now a protected species. These guys come from Arizona, from the Superstition Mountains, but during the gold rush in 1849, they started picking these up and bringing them over. Kind of the same concept as a Chinese cricket and a cricket keeper. They thought it was good luck because of their golden legs. So they had the idea if they pick it up, take it with them, they might find gold. If not, they have a snack. But they started releasing them here. So now Audubon is actually officially noting them as a invasive that's here. They're classifying them as an invasive only on the technicality they don't belong here, but they're not actually disrupting the food chain in any way. So it's kind of okay. But again, this is one of the ones that I just want to point out is so it's often mistaken for something that's, you know, highly venomous, could kill you, really scary, and it's really not. They actually burrow underground. They only come out about once every 2 years for their mating season. It lasts about 4 days. If you guys have ever been up to Malibu and you're lucky enough to go up there during that 4-day period, it's like tarantula palooza. They're all over the place. Crazy tarantula orgy parties. And then they go back down to their burrows. You don't see them for 2 years. So this is one of the ones you don't want to stomp on, squish. You want to keep these guys nice and safe. And they're actually one of the ones that'll try to eat some of the other deadly guys like the Arizona deathstalker. So this is one of the ones that is not only immune, but is helping take care of us as well. That concludes my presentation. Thank you guys so much. And if you guys have any questions for me, please feel free.
So in your sightings of rattlesnakes in the Bolsa Chica, where have you seen them the most? And I hike quite a bit out here, and I have not seen.
When it comes to Bolsa Chica specifically, a couple years ago, there was a lot of rattlesnakes, specifically the atrox and the rubers, that were located back where the Bolsa Chica Gun Club used to be. They used to keep a lot of piles of wood back there, and so it was really common to find them there. The problem is word spread, and a lot of the collectors started picking them up like crazy. They basically have the same story as the California rosy boa. Because they were so abundant, it was easy to just pluck them right out of the environment. So a lot of collectors started coming out here to do that. So that's the rubers, which is one of the most highly sought after snakes in captivity, is one of the ones you just don't really see in the wild too much anymore. And I can almost guarantee its decline at Bolsa Chicas as a direct result of people picking it up and taking it home. But the Helleri is making a serious comeback, which is the one that we found recently, and I'm actually seeing a lot of them right on the trail. I've seen them almost every other time I've been here.
Which part of the trail?
The whole trail, starting at the bridge. The picture that was in the presentation is right. This little guy was found at the trash can right at the bridge, just hanging out.
I was kind of thinking, well, they don't go on the trail, but in the bushes adjacent to the trail.
They go on the trail. We find them on the trail fairly frequently. If you get here early, if you get here by a certain time, there's joggers and enough people that have moved them off the trail. But if you get here early enough, they're on the trail. Yes?
You talked about immunity for horses. I have heard there are some people who consider themselves to be immune from rattlesnake venom.
There are people that make that claim. One of the most famous is the late Steve Irwin's father makes that claim. He also holds the Guinness record for being bit over 597 times by a variety of venomous snakes. Has never received an anti-venom for a single one of them and has survived all of them. He's also completely paralyzed on the left side of his body, and I would not be as bold to make the claim he's making. I think that the people that make that claim are kind of playing Russian roulette. I think that they're lucking out, and eventually they're going to get the one snake that does them in. So I have heard it. There are people that make that claim, but I don't think they're playing it safe. I really don't.
You don't think they're immune either?
No, I don't think they're immune. I think rattlesnakes don't always produce venom on every single bite. In fact, they try not to. Every time they use their venom, they're risking wasting it on what they could be when they could be eating food. It takes them several hours to reproduce it, sometimes several days, depending on the species. So sometimes you might be getting lucky and you're being bit by a rattlesnake that has recently used its venom, so it didn't have enough left to really affect you. So that's also another case.
That would perpetuate the myth.
Yeah, it would perpetuate the myth. A lot of the guys that get bit multiple times that make that claim are also guys that are working with HOTS in captivity. And so those are animals that are either being milked on a regular basis, so their venom is constantly diluted. And so that's a case of, well, you got bit, but you're being bit by a snake that's exhausting all of its resources, which is not really the same situation.
You mentioned that the Atrox doesn't always rattle before it would attack, but what about the other species, the Ruber and the Huron?
All of them tend to be species that will not necessarily rattle before they do it. Rattling is really something that's reserved for a worst case scenario. They don't like to give away their presence. If you rattle, it freaks out the animal you're trying to attack. Rattling is really something for if they think they're about to get stepped on by a horse. If you get within a foot range, they're really not going to do it. They pretty much have to think you're going to squish them pretty good to get them to rattle. This one I've known for a very long time. I've actually never heard it rattle. It's in captivity, but for a species that is known to rattle, it doesn't really, it doesn't do it. Do you have a second question?
I do, regarding the brown recluse and the black widow. If the black widow is the only spider in California with medically significant venom, what's up with the brown recluse? They're here too. And
That's the debate. I believe that the brown recluse is significantly medically more significant than the black widow, and I feel it is here. But several zoological societies just refuse to acknowledge that A, it exists, and if it does exist, B, is its venom worse than the black widow. The part of what's perpetuating that is the people that are having serious medical reactions to the black widow or the people that are highly allergic, and they're being used as examples of the absolute worst case scenario people. So they're saying that every person that ends up in the hospital due to a black widow had a serious problem. What they're not acknowledging is that every person that ends up in the hospital tend to be the only people that actually ended up in the hospital due to a black widow. Whereas pretty much everyone that's ever been bit by a brown recluse has had to end up in, I mean, if you have known someone that's been bit by a black widow, or if you've been bit, I've been bit, I never went to hospital, so it was not reported and it goes off record. That's a percentage of people that go off record. People that get bit by the brown recluse, you pretty much have to go to the hospital. So 100% of them are accounted for.
What's the scale on that brown recluse?
They're pretty big. They have about a 5-inch leg span, so they're, kind of, they're if you're afraid of spiders, they're pretty terrifying. they're
So you wouldn't miss it.
No, you would go, oh my God, get away from me.
Wow.
Do all the hospitals in Orange County have anti-venom?
Oh, that's a great question. So, do the hospitals in Orange County have anti-venom? We're very lucky to be in Southern California. Every major hospital in the southwestern region of the United States carries anti-venom for all the snakes I just talked about, along with every North American venomous species. So even things on the East Coast like copperheads, cottonmouths, we carry that as well. If you live anywhere else in the United States or any other country for that matter, let's say you live in New York and you had a horrifyingly traumatic zoo experience gone wrong, you're actually in big trouble. They either have to fly you to another location or they have to personally fly in a herpetologist to you with the anti-venom they have to make up then and there on the spot. So we're lucky to live where we live because we can just drive ourselves to the hospital, be taken care of immediately. If you live anywhere else, it could be hours, sometimes days before help comes to you. And then you're talking about the difference between receiving a shot versus having your hand amputated. So we're lucky.
What do you think of like the myth that I heard, like the daddy long leg spider that like hangs around your garage, the most poisonous spider, more poisonous than the black widows? I mean, it's like, okay, I don't see how that's possible. I mean, a daddy long leg cannot bite a human being.
It's a huge myth. I am not sure what started that one. The daddy longlegs is a mite, not a spider, despite its spider-like appearance. It is an arachnid. Mites are an arachnid, but he's just like the king of all mites. But they do not have technically they actually don't even have a venom. What they have is a bacteria that's associated with their bite, and so they can infect things like small rodents, but there is absolutely no record of any kind of a human being affected by a daddy longleg, so I have no idea where that one came from.
And also about the anti-venom, I guess the Kaiser, that's right by, that's off of Glen Canyon or Shady Canyon Road.
Mm-hmm.
Guess they have it there too?
They would have, yeah, they would have it at any major facility.
Where did you find that rattlesnake from anyway?
This is a
Rattlesnake that was born and raised in captivity its whole life.
Oh, okay. I thought I thought it was that one on the...
No.
On the rattles, is there any rule of thumb how many they grow a year?
No, so that was one of the myths we were talking about earlier. So you guys have probably heard the myth where they grow rattles for every year they get older. That's not true. You're born with the same number of rattles you die with. What's happening is as the snake gets bigger, just like we get bigger and then our feet and our hands get bigger, their rattles elongate, and so it appears they have a larger rattle, but it's not. They have the same number. They just elongate and get larger like any other body part.
I'm shocked.
My understanding since childhood was that when they shed their skin, they got a new rattle, and you could estimate the age.
That's one I hear it all the time. I even hear old school herpers from the 70s that will swear that is a fact, and it's not a fact. I don't really know where that
My old school goes back to the 40s.
I have a friend who even told me that he's actually eaten rattlesnake meat, and he told me it tasted like chicken.
Everything tastes like chicken. I've eaten rattlesnake.
But thank you guys very much for coming. This was great for me. I hope it was great for you.